So, when you think of ancient Rome, what pops into your head? Probably law and order, right? I mean, it's the system that became the bedrock for so much of Western civilization. But what if I told you that foundation was built on ideas that were both brilliantly modern and absolutely terrifying? Let's dive into this incredible paradox of early Roman law.
Okay, I really want you to keep this question in your head as we go, because early Rome gives us this exact puzzle. You got a society with a legal system that, in a lot of ways, feels light years ahead of its time. But in other ways, it is just unimaginably harsh. How can both of those things be true at the exact same time?
So here's a key idea from our source. Roman civilization, when it really comes into focus historically, is already surprisingly modern. It doesn't just kind of emerge from the mists of time with mythic, primitive customs like its neighbors. Nope, its legal and social structures have already taken a huge leap forward. All right, let's dig into that. What exactly made them so modern? What were the things that the Romans had already moved past, while everyone else was still stuck in the old ways?
You know what's really wild is looking at the list of things that were already gone from early Roman society. Blood feuds, where families get revenge on each other. Nope, the state handled justice. Buying wives? That was a thing of the past. And this one is huge. Women could actually hold property. That was an incredible leap forward, and it put Rome on a totally different path from its contemporaries.
And this is a perfect example of how they thought. You look at other legal systems, like the Germanic ones, and they're full of all these rituals and symbolic gestures. But the Romans, they stripped all that away. For them, law had to be crystal clear, precise, and direct. A deal with a deal because you plainly stated what you wanted in front of witnesses, not because you performed some ancient symbolic dance. It was about pure logic.
Okay, so you've got this clear, logical system. But where's the authority coming from? Well, in early Rome, it all flowed from one place, and one place only, the king. In the Roman world, all legal power, what they called use, it all came straight from the king. There weren't any competing courts, no clan leaders or local lords doing their own thing. If you had a legal problem, you went to the king or his guy. This kind of centralized, state-run justice system is another one of those things that just feels incredibly modern. And the king's law was super organized. They drew this really sharp line between public law and private law. So crimes that threatened the whole community, think treason, murder, arson, those were a big deal, a breach of the public peace, and the state would come after you directly. Everything else was seen as a private squabble between two people, which you'd bring before the king to sort out. So the state is organized. But what about money? What about business? How did they handle the contracts that are the lifeblood of any society? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. You see, the Romans had this fascinating split. Most of your day-to-day agreements were just based on honor. Your word was your bond. If you broke it, well, you'd have to deal with public shame or maybe the angry gods. But the state, it stayed out of it. But for a few very, very specific and important types of contracts, the state was all in. And I mean all in, with its full, unwavering, and as we'll see, terrifying power. And the perfect example of this is something called the nexum, which was their formal loan. This wasn't just some casual IOU. It was a public ceremony. The creditor would literally take out a scale and weigh a specific amount of copper right there in front of witnesses and give it to the debtor. By doing this ritual, both people were agreeing to bring the full and severe power of the Roman state into their deal. And that's how you create reliable credit. So we've got an organized state, clear laws, reliable credit. Sounds great, right? But remember that question we started with? The Nexum loan was all about creating trust, and the Roman state was about to show just how brutally it would protect that trust. Let's flip the coin. We've seen the modern side, now let's look at the terrifying side. What happened if you took out one of these formal Nexum loans and you just couldn't pay it back? Our source really doesn't pull any punches here. The Roman law of debt wasn't just tough, it was, and I'm quoting, frightful. The author says a Roman debtor's fate was worse than the infamous Venetian prisons or even medieval torture chambers. We're not talking about a fine here. This was something else entirely. It all started with a procedure called manus injectio, literally laying on of hands. If your debt was proven and you didn't pay, your creditor had the legal right to physically grab you, not send you a letter, not call a guard. They could snatch you off the street and haul you in front of the judge. And at that point, you couldn't even argue.
The case was already closed. And believe it or not, it got worse from there. The king would basically hand you over to your creditor. For 60 days, you'd be held captive, probably in chains, and paraded through the marketplace 3 different times. It was a last-ditch effort to see if a friend or family member would take pity and pay up. But if no one did, well, the law was horrifyingly specific. The creditors could legally kill you and divide your body, or they could sell you and your entire family into slavery in another country, or just keep you as their own personal slave.
And if this is starting to sound like something out of a Shakespeare play, you are spot on. The source makes that exact comparison. It says the law gave the creditor exactly what Shylock asked for. This wasn't some metaphorical pound of flesh. For the Romans, this was the terrifying, literal law.
Okay, so this brings us right back to our big paradox. How can a legal system be so advanced it gives women property rights, but so brutal it lets creditors literally dismember debtors? How does that even work? I mean, why? Why on earth would a society create this kind of system for itself? And this wasn't some crazy tyrant's idea. The source is clear. This is a law the Roman people ordained for itself and endured. There has to be some kind of powerful, if brutal, logic behind it.
So here they are, the 2 faces of Roman law, side by side. On one side, it's all logic and precision, where property is king. On the other, it's just this relentless, severe machine with 0 room for mercy, where a debtor is treated worse than a criminal. But here's the kicker. These 2 sides aren't a contradiction. They're 2 parts of the same whole. One actually causes the other.
And that's the absolute key to understanding this. The brutality wasn't just random cruelty. It was the enforcement mechanism. It was the ultimate guarantee. If you want to create a world where contracts are sacred and people can trust each other with money, the punishment for breaking that trust has to be absolute and terrifying.
And according to our source, this brutal certainty had very specific intended results. It was all designed to create a nation of independent, debt-free farmers. It was meant to build strong, reliable credit for merchants in the city. By crushing any and all breaches of faith, they built the economic stability a superpower needs to rise. The horror was the foundation.
And that leaves us with this powerful final idea. The Romans took the concepts of property and promises and just followed them to their most extreme logical conclusion. The principles they established, total freedom for the property owner and total subordination for the debtor, were so strong that they still echo in our own legal systems today. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our own modern world is still built on that same frightful foundation?